Guardians, welcome to another episode of Destiny 2 Builds. Last week, we brought you a build that stands out as one of the best Void Hunter builds, with the Enter the Shadows build. It focuses on staying out of line of fire and dealing devastating damage to single and multiple targets at a time. Well, what if I told you you can do the same thing but on Strand? With the Decoy Assassin build, you can. You get to pick and choose your engagements by vanishing at any given moment. You can amplify your damage by using unraveling rounds to deal even more damage to single and multiple targets. This build rivals that of the Gear Falcon's Void build, with its stealth, power, and destruction. Whether you're trying to run activity solo or diving into the newest dungeons, this build will let you spread your damage throughout the battlefield while keeping you quiet as a mouse. So Guardians, get ready to weave your way through any activity and choose your destiny with the Decoy Assassin build. Remember to leave a like if you found this video helpful, and if you like seeing build videos and other Destiny 2 helpful content, consider hitting that subscribe button. With that being said, let's jump right on into it. This build rivals that of the Gear Falcon's Void build for two main reasons. First, invisibility. People like the Gear Falcon's build because you have so many ways to go invisible. It really opens up and lets you choose the way you want to play. Well, this build has that too. Since you're using Assassin's Cowl, every powered melee kill we get lets us go invisible and gives us a bump in our health. While this in theory can be used on every subclass, it's taken to the next level on Strand. We can add in the grapple grenade and Widow Silk so that we now have access to 3 powered melees at any given notice. We also have access to threaded Specter, so that if we're still on cooldown, we can leave behind a decoy and make it as if we're invisible, which also allows us to use our weapons freely. So we have access to infinite invisibility and inherently survivability. But the second reason that Gear Falcons is so popular is for infinite access to volatile rounds, which deal AoE damage and single target damage. Well, all we have to do is add in Thread of Propagation, and now every time we're getting our powered melee kill, we're getting unraveling rounds, which in my opinion is stronger than its Void counterpart. And let's not forget that the grapple melee counts as a powered melee, so we have infinite access to unraveling rounds with our 3 powered melees. So let's dive into the build and break down how it works. First up for our super, we are taking Silk Strike. It is the only option, but it is pretty good. And let's be clear, Tether is one of the best options for bosses and can be good at helping control a room. But Tether doesn't let you swing around like Spider-Man. Silk Strike is really good when it comes to ad clearing. It doesn't do a ton of DPS since it is a roaming super, but if you're in any regular content, it's a ton of fun to use. And for our abilities, first up, we're taking the Grapple Grenade. Grapple is just so fun to use. The fact that it also counts as a powered melee, it pairs perfectly with this build. I found that we can use grapple all the way up through master level content, since we should be invisible before and after we're using it. And for our melee, we have Threaded Spike. It is a pretty strong melee since for every target you hit, you get more and more melee energy back, and if you catch it on the way back, you can get up to your full melee back. However, you don't have to catch it on the way back, because it seems that if you do, you will lose your invisibility. So I recommend not catching it, and you will still get some energy back from hitting multiple targets. And for our class ability, we're going with Gambler's Dodge. It only makes sense for this build since Gambler's Dodge will immediately refund our melee if we dodge near enemies. And Assassin's Cowl revolves around using a powered melee, so since you can get a decoy by dodging, you might as well get up close and personal with enemies and get your melee back. So this now gives you up to 5 times to lose your enemies with 2 grapples, 2 melees, and 1 decoy. And as I mentioned, we have 2 grapples, and that comes from our first aspect, Widow Silk. I really thought about taking the Beyblade from Whirling Maelstrom over this, though I landed back on Widow Silk for its perfect synergy. In easy content, you can create a grapple point with your first grapple, and then infinitely grapple around, clearing an entire area while going invisible after every melee kill. In harder content, this just allows you to have an extra grapple melee, which could be enough to get you the extra invisible time to stay alive. We're also pairing that with Threaded Specter, and this is where you gain so much more advantage over Gear Falcons on Void. See, invisibility is strong for staying alive, but the moment you want to engage with the enemy, you're vulnerable again. With this aspect, now whenever you dodge, you create a decoy, and this decoy will create threadlings when destroyed, but more importantly, it will make all the ads nearby target the decoy instead of you, allowing you to run, shoot, heck, do whatever you want. This thing has them so entranced, you could have a party and they wouldn't even notice. Alright, moving on to our fragments. First up, we are taking Thread of Warding, so that whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, we're given Woven Mail for 10 seconds, and this amps up your survivability to the max. Now you have access to invisibility and health on melee kills, and an extra 45% damage resistance whenever you pick up an orb. We pair that with Thread of Propagation, so that powered melee final blows will give your Strand weapons unraveling rounds. We have so many many ways to do a powered melee that this means we almost always have unraveling rounds. And since the threads from unraveling rounds also will unravel targets they hit, you'll be spreading unravel to any enemies nearby, leading to more damage across the battlefield. After that, we are taking Thread of Generation, so that dealing damage generates grenade energy. This does depend on the type of damage that it comes from, but since we have 2 grapples, this is almost always useful since it's making it so that it's very hard to run out of ability energy. And finally, we're taking Thread of Evolution, so that threadlings travel further and deal more damage. This felt like the best option since we create threadlings with our decoys and with the seasonal artifact or our weapons. Alright, let's talk about ways to improve the build. First up, for your stat mods, resilience is going to be our number one. With the added 30% damage resistance on top of the 45% that we get from woven mail, it really starts to add up, especially in harder content. And after that, I like to shoot for 100 discipline. Grapple has a short cooldown, but since we get 2 of them, I like to take full advantage of a lower cooldown. And since it also counts as a powered melee, it doesn't matter about having high strength. So next option is a duel between strength and mobility. I shoot for roughly 50 to 60 in both of these categories. Our dodge already has a short cooldown, but we do want to get it back fairly often to create more decoys and to get back our melee. So 50 to 60 feels like a sweet spot for both of these. And just like in the Gear Falcons build, pour the rest of the stats into intellect since recovery is kind of pointless with this build. All right, moving on to our armor mods. First up, our helmet. I am taking Harmonic Siphon so that rapid kills with strand weapons are going to create orbs. We are going to be using our strand weapons a ton since we get so much damage from unraveling. And we're also going to pair that with surge mods later, so it's going to make it easier to get back our super and keep up our surge mods, as well as get that important woven mail. After that, you could go for hands-on for the extra super energy, but honestly, it doesn't really feel worth it to me, so I like to choose Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout so that we're generating more heavy ammo bricks for both us and our team. It is kind of a personal preference thing, so if you want to use your super more often, definitely go for hands-on. You're going to be using your powered melee a ton. And for our arms, we're taking heavy-handed so that our powered melee kills will now create orbs, and we have so many ways to do a powered melee. So it's just going to create more orbs, leading to more super energy, and more importantly, woven mail as well as weapon surge. And since we are using so many powered melees, we're taking impact induction and focusing strike. Impact induction makes it so that melee damage grants grenade ability energy. So yes, inherently your grapple grenade is refunding itself. And then we're also taking focusing strike so that melee damage grants class ability energy. Like I said, with 4 ways to activate a powered melee and that we have Thread of Generation so we constantly get back our grenade, this means we can consistently get back our melee and our class ability as well. For chest mods, we are taking the reliable 3 resistance mods. It's the easy thing to do for all content, and since you can still swap out a chest piece for extra heavy ammo whenever you're rallying to a flag, I don't really like to take reserve mods. So resistance mods are our best option, and I like to take 1 of each: Arc, Void, and Solar. So we're getting a flat 15% versus basically all damage in the game. For our leg mods, we are taking 3 strand weapon surge. Getting the added 22% weapon damage is really strong when you pair it with unraveling rounds. You could also just run 2 and add in another element so that you can match either your secondary weapon or your heavy. It kind of depends on your weapon loadout, so pick whichever option feels best to you. And finally, for our mark, we're taking time dilation so that our decaying armor charge is going to last longer and we get longer uptime on our weapon surge mods. This does roughly go from about a 30-second maximum to a 45-second maximum, which is huge. I do like to also pair that with powerful attraction so that whenever we do activate our class ability, we're collecting any nearby orbs. This option or Reaper is really strong, but I find Powerful Attraction to be slightly better for this build in particular. But if you do like Reaper, then feel free to go for Reaper. And finally, we're taking Bomber so that we're getting 12% grenade energy whenever we use our class ability. And this is super helpful since we do have access to holding up to 2 grenades. I usually like to use my class ability whenever I run out of both of my grapple melees anyway, so I like to have this as an added bump to our grenades. So let's talk about the artifact. There are a few artifact perks that do mesh with this build very well. The most important being Dragon's Bite for a chance to suspend when breaking target shield with a strand weapon, Unraveling Orbs, and Horde Shuttle, so that orbs will give unraveling rounds, and damaging an unraveling target with weapons spawns a threadling. All other mods can be situationally helpful, so pick whichever one fits your situation. Alright, let's talk weapons. To take full advantage of unraveling rounds, we want our main weapon to be in this slot and to be strand. There are a few good exotic options, and those being Quicksilver Storm if you want an auto rifle, Final Warning if you want a sidearm. And you can also take Wishkeeper, which is a bow that allows you to also suspend. All are fantastic exotic options that synergize perfectly with this build. If you don't want to use the exotic slot, I'd go for something like Fang of Iriut for a scout, Nightshade for a pulse, and one of my new favorites is Lethal Abundance for an auto. It's a high impact auto from Iron Banner, and it can roll with Onslaught, and man, it helps a lot. Since it already shoots slow, the increased fire rate with each kill helps this weapon absolutely shred through enemies without blowing through your mag. If you can get a roll, I definitely recommend it. For the energy slot, I do like to take a utility weapon, and I love using this as a utility slot, so there are two weapons that I like best. Buried Bloodline is immaculate. If you have the Catalyst, you not only get Devour, which means you get more grenades and health, but also you'll get to be able to weaken targets, which is one of the only other benefits that Void has over Strand. The other option I really like is Indebted Kindness, and it has been a favorite of mine recently with this and other builds. You can get a roll with Volt Shot, and using something like Wishkeeper in your primary, you'll now have the ability to stun all champs. Volt Shot stuns overloads. Unraveling rounds on Wishkeeper will stun barriers, and since Wishkeeper doesn't have an intrinsic champion stunner, you can also use its traps to suspend and stun unstoppable champs, and that would leave your heavy slot to be whatever you want. Otherwise, pick a weapon that fits the activity you're in. It's open to be any weapon. If you need to deal more damage, maybe take something like a fusion with controlled burst. It really depends on your situation. And for a heavy slot, I like to take either a Strand or a weapon that matches our energy slot weapon. Since we have Strand Surge, matching a heavy weapon to a Strand can be a good option, but you could alternatively match your secondary weapon so that you can take one of those surge mods and match it with both of these weapons. If you are going for Strand weapons, Semiotician is a high impact rocket that will be getting a buff in the March 5th update. You can get Field Prep and Bipod to have a metric butt ton of rockets ready to go. I believe this should give you up to 17 total rockets, which will be absolutely ludicrous. Cataphrag GL3 or Craxus Distress are both solid grenade launchers depending on the situation you're in. One has surrounded and the other has bait and switch, so if you have either of those with those rolls, they're very good. Otherwise, pick the best heavy for the situation you're in. When I first sat down and started planning this build, I was thoroughly disappointed in the available exotics for Strand Hunter. I saw this exotic and thought about grapple being a powered melee, and that you'd have a decoy available, and I got a bit hopeful, but never did I dream of how strong it would actually feel. It feels just as strong, if not stronger, than the Gear Falcon's Enter the Shadows build. Flying across the battlefield with your grapple, distracting enemies with your decoy, or sneaking into the mix with invisibility, this build helps you stay alive and deal devastating damage. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed your time seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below what you might change or how you'd improve the Decoy Assassins build. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.